Hey, 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 hey. What it do? What's going on, everybody? It is the humblest of hosts, Soul Expression. Welcome back to the Inner Storyteller podcast. Welcome back to the Inner Storyteller YouTube channel and the ufuluchild YouTube channel. What's going on, everybody? We have a wonderful show, a wonderful, wonderful show planned for you. And yeah, I'm just very excited to explain more of the philosophy behind this book, The Inner Storyteller, and specifically get really deep into uh, what I believe, what I feel like I've discovered through observation, contemplation, reflection, testing, some of the scientific method, but more of the philosophical method, if you will, of discovery, right? First and foremost, please like the video. You gotta like the video, guys. You have to like the video like the bird has to flap. Okay, the bird has to flap. You have to like the video in the exact same way. It's a symbiotic. It's paramount to our survival and evolution and freedom that you like the video. Okay, in somebody's opinion, somewhere in the world. Also, you may get $1 million tomorrow if you like the video. Very true. You may just happen upon $1 million that would be yours. Last but not least, please subscribe to the channels. If you don't, I may not be able to monetize my podcast ever. And I want to monetize my podcast. So please subscribe. If you are here and like and subscribe, you are in for real conversations, good people, about natural law, religion, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and the great, money, anarchy, culture, and how mankind is manipulated from the shadows by individuals, forces that do not have our best interests at heart. And we are not bashing faith systems here. We are not calling people names for having a religion or a faith system. We are simply examining the psychological affects and effects of the stories that we have the most faith in, ones we have the most stake in, and how those stories shape society. And that examination sits right alongside an honest look at the current human condition, which is, of course, slavery. Government is slavery. And the question we have to keep coming back to is what could actually be improved with a proper understanding of the inner storyteller and how it works. And if any of that makes you a little uneasy, makes you a little angry, makes you uncomfortable in any way, please understand and be assured, reassured that although you are 1000% encouraged to stay and confront those feelings, you are indeed welcome to leave at any time. After you like the video, can't leave until you like the video. And with all that being said, good people, let's get into Miss Red. Miss Red is a really dope individual. And I want this video to wash over you for a second. And then we're going to get into my script. So we're going to just let this video play. I'm happy to announce that Miss Red will be blessing us with her presence on Saturday. When I go live this Saturday, Miss Red will be with me here not here physically in the studio, but here in the StreamYard studio. And we will be going hard. We will be talking about topics. But first and foremost, let me introduce you to her via her sharing some of her story and sharing what it's like for her to say no to these systems with real consequences and real repercussions and real risk, standing on business and sometimes maybe suffering although I'm not trying to put that word in her mouth, for what you believe in, or what you stand for, what your principles are, what your values are, in a way that you can, right? In a way that you can stand it. But check it out.
I'm tired of being in slavery yet? Wake up, people. It's time. It's time to wake up the dragon. That's what I'm here to do. Pray, keep paying bills, marching and voting with your picket signs. That's not going to change anything. Voting is not going to change anything. Sorry, it's not. When has it ever? When I say that we need to stop paying rent, I mean that. And everybody's asking me my situation. I live in my grandfather's house. He's recently deceased. So his house is going through probate. So I'm staying in it while that happens and my family figures out what they want to do. But prior to that, I was homeless. I was living in my car. I was living from couch to couch with friends, family when I could. But I lived in my car. I had a gym membership so I could take showers. I was willing to go through the depths. I'm willing to go without for the bigger cause. I know a lot of people are not on that level, but I'm hoping that more people push themselves to do so. I'm not saying just up and quit your job, don't pay your rent, get evicted. I know people have lives and they have kids and everything like that. But what I will say is that it's going to take all of us. If everybody does it at one time, if we plan for it, if we create a movement around it, if enough people start talking about it and then we can take action, what are they going to do? Evict a whole building? Evict a whole neighborhood? They don't have the resources, guys. They just don't. What do you think is going to happen? We need to start taking the power back because we have it. They have y'all so scared. We can make all this shit go away. We can turn all this shit around. There's nothing different than what we're doing now than what our ancestors had to go through. Still getting murdered in the streets. Cops are killing people. They haven't stopped. This is an ongoing thing. We have fed this system, the system that is corrupt, the system that is gangsters, the system that runs this country like a business, because that's what it is. It's a corporation. Okay. The USA is a business and it's ran as such. And what do you do to cripple a business? You take away its funding. We are the funding. It's not too late, but it's about to be. And that's why I speak on it. Y'all tired of being in slavery yet?
Misread, ladies and gentlemen. You know, give it up. Give it up for her. Let that wash over you for a moment. You know, sometimes, how do I? There we go. Sorry, I had to find a setting in my. Need to keep that open. Need this right here. Put this over here. There we go. Okay. Some on the fly technical troubleshooting. She said it's going to take all of us, and then gave an example. Everybody in the same building refused to pay rent ever, right? Either you could say building, you could say apartment complex, right? All of building 1 through building 12 of the apartment complex, nobody's paying. What are they going to do? 7 months go by, nobody paid rent. What are they going to do? Right? Like, oh, y'all organized. We got to bring in the military and come put y'all in secret jail. And then the world watches that happen, right? The community just didn't pay rent. The world watches that they bring in the crazy guns, take us all to secret prison, or the whole community, whatever, somewhere. And the world watches that happen. I don't know. Anyway, it's going to take all of us. Keep that video's message in mind all the way to Saturday, but definitely keep it in mind for right now as we get into the spell and the spell book. Let me put up. I need to open something so that I can put up my thumbnail behind me and y'all can have a visual to go with my words here. Boom. Did it open? Oh, here. here. See, whenever I do something like this, I always gotta move this over there, that over here, blah, blah, blah. Oh, right, I don't need that. I can do this. Ah, bam. Add to stage, baby. Here we go. Oh, did I? Where did I? There it is. Okay. The spell and the spell book part 2. I want to start off today where we left off on Friday, right? Which is we were explaining and talking about the sorting function of the inner storyteller. It's it's a mechanism operating within the whole operating system of the inner storyteller. Right? The inner storyteller is more like a mechanical thing than a, let's say, sentient biological thing. It's more a function of life, if a characteristic of consciousness as the human being knows it, or as intelligent beings such as ourselves know it. And let's get into it. Okay. Everything we're going to talk about today depends on understanding one thing clearly, which is that the sorting function of the inner storyteller does not evaluate incoming information. It files it. It files it at a speed that precedes conscious thought. Okay, when I say the speed of thought, that means it happens at how fast thought can move, right? Or how fast thought can appear, which is instantaneous. So it's not the speed of light, it's much faster. At a depth, okay, incoming information is filed at a speed and at a depth that precedes feeling. Before you have a conscious reaction to anything, the story, the news story, the legal document, the celebrity endorsement or celebrity activity, government declaration of some sort, government movement, right? The sorting function has already assigned the information of the event or the content to a certain drawer in your mind, right? In your mind's file. We already told you that the inner storyteller is mechanical. And this means that this is not some sort of punishment or reward for mastering your mind. It's it's a pathway consciousness chooses, or it chose, I guess, to make our inner experience real. Our inner experience is real because we storify everything. Happens in a narrative, and you only get narrative when you have a theme, and the theme is like the category. Okay, so it's like a filing system, the sorting function of the inner storyteller. It's like a filing system. It already told you what it means and determined whether it belongs in the safe category or the dangerous category or the true category or the false category, the legitimate category or the suspicious category, and so on. And it did all of that before you knew anything happened or was taken into the mind. We talked yesterday about how that mechanism operates. I said yesterday. We talked Friday about how that mechanism operates at the perceptual level, how it's wordless, how it runs at something closer to the speed of thought than the speed of language, how you only know it by looking at its effects, same way that you only know air exists by looking at the way that it moves things. Today, I want to show you what that mechanism looks like when it is deliberately exploited, not accidentally, not as a side effect of culture, but deliberately by people that understand the mind, institutions who had people in them that understood, whether through esoteric tradition or legal sophistication or psychological study or just trial and error, right? Who knew and understood that controlling the inner storyteller, predicting and manipulating the filing system of the sorting function is the most efficient form of control that exists and ever will for a human. Part 9 of my book opens up with an explanation of the letter A. Not as a grammar lesson, mind you, but as a demonstration of the mechanism that I'm describing in this episode. A is a symbol. A carries meaning. Once that symbol has been repeated enough times in enough consistent contexts, the inner storyteller stops experiencing A as a mark on the page. It almost doesn't even see it. It becomes automatic, invisible in its operation, immediate in its effect. You no longer see A and then decide, what does it mean? You see A and the meaning is already there before you even really see A. That is not just efficiency. That is conditioning. And not in the bad way. Conditioning in the neutral, the definition of conditioning kind of way. Not conditioning with the connotation of like somebody. Like that's just the way that the mind works. It's just the way consciousness works. That's what And here's the part that matters most for today's conversation. Once meaning becomes automatic, it also begins to feel unquestioned. The symbol no longer really gets examined, it gets executed. And when a symbol is no longer examined, it can carry anything inside it, including content that would never really survive honest scrutiny. Now, this is very bird's eye view explanation. We are going to dive deep into examples on exactly what all of this means. You might have to watch this episode twice. Symbol no longer gets examined, it's executed. When we realize that symbols carry meaning and those meanings are assigned, and we realize that anything that we experience becomes a symbol for us personally, becomes a symbol in our memory, right? A symbol pointing to this is the way life is, this is the way people are, this is the way I am. That becomes a symbol in that way. Then we begin to realize the power of the inner storyteller. Okay? Because again, when a symbol is no longer examined, it can carry any meaning inside, including content that would never survive scrutiny, and it can deliver that content directly into the inner storyteller's filing system without triggering the examination mechanism at all. This is the architecture of a spell. A spell is not just magic in the fantasy sense. A spell is a symbol system whose meaning has been made automatic through enough that the population receiving the symbol processes the content without examining the container that it's in. The word government, for example, the word government arrives in some situation, right? The person in a suit shows up demanding things. Somebody says, well, who are you? And they pull out some sort of badge representing government. Now you're like, oh, we're dealing with somebody who's from the government, right? They were making demands. Somebody said, well, who are you? They pull out a badge. The word government arrives, and the nervous system responds before the thought arrives. The word contract arises, and the obligation is already being filed into the mind a certain way before any other like moral examination occurs. The word treaty arrives, and the legitimacy is already being assigned. The word law arrives, and the authority is already being accepted, defended, and justified. None of that is rational, and all of it is the sorting function doing what it is designed to do, not designed by man, designed by the creator of this place and the creator of it. Again, we're just describing something that happens inside. And the spellbook is the body of language, procedure, and institutional repetition that keeps those automatic assignments running. So to look at a concrete example, let's say an 18-year-old young black male signs a recording contract as a rapper. They're talented beyond belief, right? Or even, just a little more talented than a lot of their peers, let's say. They have the it factor amongst their in-group. They're ambitious, hungry for success and to live life to their full potential. They're also 18, right? They haven't studied contract law, most likely. They haven't dealt with shady people in a particular industry for years. They may have heard stories. They may or may not have believed said stories. They don't have independent legal counsel, oftentimes, who is loyal to their interests rather than to the industry's relationship to them, right? The ecosystem of the lawyers who represent the artists, who get messed up by the system, and then the artist tries to sick the lawyer on them, and the lawyer gets paid all of this money to try this case, and the case is failing because the judge just says, well, you signed the contract, boy. You signed the contract. It's right there on page 4,622. You didn't see it? Sorry. They sign because the opportunity is real, and the alternative is continued obscurity or not what they want. Inside the contract, past the parts that describe the deal, in language that sounds like what they agreed to, there are clauses. Dozens and dozens of clauses. Clause 86, Clause 322, definitions, sections that redefine ordinary words to mean something entirely different than what the artist would understand them to mean upon first read if they skipped the definitions section, right? Restrictions on how funds are accessed, on how certain revenue streams are categorized, on what constitutes a promotional expense chargeable against royalties. It's all in the contract. Now, this 18-year-old, let's say they don't read those clauses for whatever reason, or they read them and the language is dense enough that the meaning doesn't land, or they read them and understand parts of it and trusted that the people across the table were operating in good faith, right? So let's not just leave it at, oh, they didn't put any effort into it. 3 years later, they go to access some money that they earned from their own labor and talent, their own body, on the stage, in the studio, practicing, losing weight, doing what they can. And when they try to access this money, they're met with the architecture of Clause 86 in their contract, with red tape, with a legal structure that tells them clearly, well, actually, Clause 86, you agreed to not touch this money. The story gets to court. The judge hears everything, including his age at the time he signed, and under what circumstances and what family history he signed, and all of this. He hears all of the case, all of the facts of the case. The judge can see, any human being in that room would be able to see, that a young man with no legal sophistication was walked into an agreement that served only the interests of the institution that they were signing with and not their own, under the guise of they were signing something that was supposed to help them. The judge can see that this is the moral reality of what happened. But what is the judge going to do, good people? 9 times out of 10, the judge is going to rule on the contract side. Not because the judge is evil necessarily, but because judges operate inside a system whose fundamental premise is that a signature creates an obligation that supersedes the moral reality under which they were signed, which is bullshit, of course. And just say for the record, Your Honor, that's bullshit. And I would say that in court. Now, to rule otherwise, to say that the ethical reality of how this agreement came to exist overrides its technical terms in some way, would be to set what's called a precedent. Precedent, especially in court, is very important and a strategic avenue navigated by these people in robes. They don't like to set precedent that may be threatening to the entire system down the line. And that precedent would not stay in the music industry. It would move immediately to every other contract in the system. Mortgage instrument, the employment instrument, terms of service to Disney Plus, the plea deal signed under duress. Did you know that Disney Plus has in their terms an agreement? Now, this is a streaming service, okay? Has in their terms and agreements, or had a few years ago, I'm sure they still do, but this was a court case, that if something happens to you at a Disney theme park, you can't sue Disney by signing up for this app, even if you delete the app later. And somebody got caught up with that click of a check mark that you need to check so that you can stream your movies and shows on Disney Plus. Somebody went to court for because their kid was hurt at a park, and Disney got, you know, the favor because the contract that was signed was an app called Disney Plus that the man had deleted since then. Like it just didn't have it on his new phone or something. It was something like that. I don't remember the exact details. And I'll also say, all of this is allegedly what's in the case. I heard it from somebody who heard it from somebody. Let me just say that for the record, because some of the memory is fuzzy and I don't want to get sued by Disney Plus or Disney anything for defamation. But allegedly, what I think I remember the case was talking about was this man didn't even have Disney Plus on his current system or whatever, or devices. And Disney still was not held accountable to, what happened at their park. And he was not able to go through with the case and talk the merits of the case to the judge because procedurally they were able to get everything dismissed since he had signed or clicked the checkbox and agreed to the terms and conditions for Disney Plus. And we talking about something that physically happened to his physical child at a physical theme park. Insanity. These contracts, these contract lords and their game. It's like all humanity goes out the window because some digital piece of paper, so to speak, has you checking the checkbox, or somebody, whoever created your account, check the checkbox to agree to the terms and conditions. And now you can't even take them to court if they, park serves food that, makes your child almost die or something like that. Anyway, the plea deal with the 18-year-old music artist, hypothetical. The plea deal is signed under duress. The international treaty is ratified by a government we're not back to it. Sorry, yeah. Let me move back up, actually, because that Disney story cut into the middle of my script here, and I wasn't done a point I was making. So to rule otherwise would set a precedent, right? To rule in a way that ignores what's in the contract and says, no, but this is what's right and wrong. That would set a precedent that would threaten the whole system because it would move to every other contract, the mortgage instrument, the employment agreement, the terms of service, the plea deal signed under duress, the international treaty ratified by a government whose population was never consulted. The entire architecture of contract law depends on the inner storyteller of the population accepting that signature, accepting that a signature creates a moral reality. That you signed it is the spell, right? The fact that you signed it is the spell. The clause that you didn't read, 86, is the fine print of said spell. And the courtroom that honors the contract over the conscience is the social reinforcement mechanism of the spell. The sorting function makes this possible because it has filed contract, meaning it has associated the concept of contracts in general into the legitimate drawer and filed a signed contract into the binding drawer. So deep and so early in life that most people never question whether that association was actually chosen by them, that they actually believe contracts are this binding, even if they're so immoral and just dumb, even if the terms in the contract are just so unnatural, unreasonable, inhumane, right? Now, let's look at the same mechanism operating through a completely different container, okay? When a celebrity endorses something, like a product, political candidate, pharmaceutical drug, uh, a lifestyle challenge, right? The inner storyteller of the celebrity, the fan, excuse me, the inner storyteller of the fan of the celebrity does not evaluate the product itself that's being endorsed. It simply receives the fact that the celebrity, which is filed in one drawer, is endorsing a product, and that gets filed according to how they feel about the celebrity, unless they're awake to certain things, right? Because the authority of the vessel has already been established. Fame has already been associated with credibility, not through reasoning, but years and years and years of cultural repetition says fame equals credibility, at least a little bit. The celebrity was on the television and the magazine, the radio and the billboard and the halftime show, right? And the halftime show was the source of entertainment for the fan. Emotion, passion, parasocial connection almost. You feel like you know them through their content. The sorting function filed the face into the trusted category long before the endorsement ever arrived of the candidate, the product, whatever. So when the endorsement comes from the celebrity, even when it contradicts something that the fan already knows, even when it conflicts with their own experience, even when a quiet signal somewhere inside sounds the alarm and says, this doesn't feel right. The impression overrides that signal. Because the impression arrived first and loudest. The impression is faster. It carries the accumulated weight of years of association, repetition, and the principal signal underneath is slower or not even really moving. It's steady, quieter, less flattering, simple, less complicated. To the part of us that wants to believe our trusted sources are trustworthy, principle is harder to listen to than impression. Part 10 of my book names this distinction precisely. Impressions are fast, emotional, conditioned, socially reinforced. They arrive from fear, memory, symbols, authority, trauma, urgency, and repetition. And because they arrive fast, most people mistake them for truth. Principle, on the other hand, is slow, quiet, less flattering to the ego. It does not arrive with force. It does not arrive with panic or thrill or outrage. It waits underneath all of that. It's present. It's still patient. And the celebrity endorsement mechanism, the contract signing mechanism, the identity politics mechanism all work by making sure that impressions fill the filing space before principle has time to arrive, or before principle can be repeated enough for it to matter when it arrives. Speaking of identity politics is the most sophisticated version of the same mechanism that we've been describing, because it operates at the level of survival. Fitting in is surviving for a lot of people, and it always has been for a lot of people. The sorting function evolved in part to manage in-group and out-group dynamics. Who is safe? Who is dangerous? Who shares my interests? Who threatens my interests? uh, this mechanism was adapted in an environment where the tribe was the unit of survival and the stranger was a genuine unknown and untrustworthy. The political and media ecosystem has learned to activate that mechanism deliberately, that mechanism within the fear part of the mind. When you are given a group identity, be it a race, party, religion, or religious sect, class, gender, nationality, style, the sorting function begins filing incoming information through the lens of that identity before examination can occur, before evaluation. Information that confirms the in-group narratives the in-group's narrative gets filed into the true drawer automatically. Information that challenges gets filed into the threat or propaganda drawer automatically. And the person holding both drawers experiences that filing as their own reason, as their own discernment, and as their own values. But it's not. Never has been, never will be. It's simply the sorting function running the identity script that was installed through faulty culture, faulty media, the constant repetition of who the enemy is and what the enemy believes from authority before the person had any tools to examine what was being installed in their mind's computer. This is why people defend policies that harm them. There's an echo in the audio. Uh-oh. Dang, I've been going for 40 minutes. Hmm. That's funny. The soundboard got touched. So that's what happened. So okay, it should be gone now. Sometimes I do not have the uh comments on my StreamYard because I'm not used to live viewers yet. But thank you for the warning that you sent 15 minutes ago. Boom. This is why people defend policies that harm them. And that's crazy in and of itself that we defend policies, contracts that harm us. This is why people attack people who agree with them substantively but belong to the wrong group. Right? You agree with me on all fronts, but I identify with the group that you don't identify with, and you identify with that group's apparent adversary, and therefore, even though we agree, we can't work together. This is why people feel genuine loyalty to institutions that have demonstrated time and time again no genuine loyalty in return. The impression of tribal belonging overrides the principal signals that would otherwise ask, does this actually serve the people I love? Does this actually move toward the world I claim to want? The bully with a political brand is still a bully. The sorting function just doesn't file it that way without deliberately, consciously mastering your mind because the tribal container is in the way. Now, take all of that and scale it to the level of international governance. A treaty is a contract between governments, for example. We have already established what governments are, right? The concentrated power structures whose internal checking mechanisms were designed by people with sophisticated knowledge of how populations are managed psychologically. When those structures sign agreements with other with each other about how they will conduct themselves toward other populations, agreements prohibiting certain conduct towards civilians, agreements establishing rules of engagement, agreements creating international bodies with the stated purpose of accountability. The inner storyteller of the watching world files treaty into the legitimate authority drawer and files international law into the justice is possible for all drawer. It files the existence of the bodies created to enforce these agreements as something will be done if they break the rules drawer. And then the conduct occurs anyway, the misconduct. The response happens, it's usually very procedural, and committees convene and talk. Resolutions are drafted and condemnations are issued. Referrals are made to bodies whose enforcement capacity is structurally limited by the same power dynamics that produced the conduct in the first place, i.e., corruption. The sorting function of the global population files international responses into something's being done now to that drawer. The conduct continues. The populations, having watched the procedure unfold, experiences a kind of exhausted resignation that gets filed into that's just how things work. That's just how the world is drawer. No justice, no account, no balance, no God, no morals. All of it is the spell maintaining itself through the procedure. Because what is actually happening, stripped of every legal container, every procedural framework, if you will, is people being bad to other people. Yeah, I said it that way. That's the complete description. Peers being bad to their peers. And I like to say peers because we have this container called elites working on our inner storyteller all the time. Peers using resources and power accumulated through earlier iterations of the same behavior and doing the same things with it in newer ways. The treaty didn't change that. The international body didn't change or prevent that. The condemnation didn't change. Nobody cared about it. The filing in the inner storyteller of the watching world changed what they were willing to call it. And that filing is the spell. And here is where the through line across all of these examples comes into play. And I think this is the last section of my notes. No, there's one more. The music industry contract, the celebrity endorsement, the identity politics, tribal sorting, the international treaty. These are all instances of the same mechanism operating at different scales. In every case, there is a spell, a symbol system whose automatic meaning assignment in the inner storyteller overrides the principle that would otherwise produce a clear moral evaluation and good results. In every case, the spell depends on the population never really examining the container, never asking who made these definitions, who wrote these definitions, never asking what the authority of the document actually rests on at its foundation, never asking whether the filing that the sorting function made was chosen or installed by school, media, propaganda, adults that are, just going along with the system. And in every case, the institution enforcing the spell, the court, the media ecosystem, the political machinery, the international body, they cannot afford to allow the examination to even occur in the greater population. Because if that examination occurs, then the precedent is set. If a judge rules that moral conditions override contract terms, then every contract becomes vulnerable to moral scrutiny. If a population examines the authority of the international body and finds it is structurally incapable of accountability, then the spell of legitimate governance begins to lose its power. If a person examines the tribal identity their sorting function is running and finds it was installed before they could choose it, then the entire machinery of identity politics loses its primary operating mechanism. The spellbook protects itself by making examination feel dangerous, by associating the examination of authority with instability, with threat, with the loss of the protections the system claims to provide. The sorting function files examination of the system into the dangerous and ungrateful drawer. Hmm? And most people, and let's be honest, because we're conditioned since childhood to associate external authority with safety, okay? Most people feel the weight of that and stop examining for themselves how they came to these conclusions. In part 9 of my book, I describe what reclaiming authorship over your life actually requires. And it doesn't begin with a revolution, it begins with what I term in my book the ground floor. Symbols shape perception. Perception shapes choice. Choice shapes systems, which means the reclaiming of authorship over your life begins with examining the symbols driving your behavior, with developing the habit, the slow, unglamorous, friction filled, you know, what's the word for it? You don't get thanked for it? Habit of catching the filing before it settles, noticing when you're operating just off of impressions before checking in with principle. If asking honestly whether the obligation you feel toward a contract, an institution, a tribal identity, or an international body of some sort is something that you chose or something that was installed before you had the tools to examine what was being put in your mind. That examination is called moral archaeology, going back through the default operating system and asking, did I really choose this? Or was it filed before I knew what filing was? The final battle is not between nations or parties or classes or religions. It's between impression and principle. impression is what presses into the inner storyteller automatically, fast, conditioned, socially reinforced, usually shaped by fear. Principle is what is recognized, chosen, and lived in conscious alignment with truth, which is slower, quieter, steadier, and more costly. It often asks something of you that your impressions would rather avoid. And losing that battle to impressions, living by whatever presses hardest on you, confusing conditioning for nature, participating in things that you know are wrong, and calling that participation just doing your job or procedure or obligation to a contract. That is the spell book doing what it's designed to do. But the good news is that a spell only works on a mind that hasn't examined itself. You, by being here, are examining that right now. So the only question left to ask is, what story are you willing to live? Let me know in the